everyone. We'll give everybody just a second to pop on here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get going while everybody kind of joins. Welcome to the Beauty Debrief. I'm Lexi Lebsack, West Coast correspondent here at Glossy, and I'm here with my colleagues Tatiana Pyle, managing editor, Courtney Marabella, social media and audience manager, and our editor-in-chief here at Glossy, Jill Manoff. This is going to be a really great beauty debrief, so I'm just going to get right into it. We've had so many amazing experts on the show over the last few months, fielding hard to answer questions. And today we're taking on some of the PR and marketing questions around reaching editors. So what is the best way to see beauty and wellness editors with the latest products in 2024? And how does it differ from influencer seeding? I am thrilled to welcome Erica Metzger, a beauty editor and director with more than 19 years of experience. Erica's CV includes Better Homes and Gardens, Refinery 29, which we have in common, Shape, Cosmopolitan, 17, so many amazing books and websites. She also has an amazing industry newsletter called The Beauty Loop, where she learns countless insights from all of the editors working today. Erica, welcome.
Hi, Lexi. Hi, Glossy team. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're so glad you're here. Okay, so we love the Beauty Loop. I think that we all kind of talked about this before. I think we're all subscribing. But tell us about your newsletter, the Beauty Loop, for anyone unfamiliar. Who is it for and what do you discuss?
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so the Beauty Loop is my baby, who's going to turn 6 this summer, which is wild to me. But it's a weekly industry newsletter, and it's geared for beauty journalists and beauty publicists. And it comes out every week, and I recap beauty events, product launches. There's client updates for our contact list because those are always changing and it's hard to keep up to date. I send out pitch and market requests on behalf of editors to publicists. I'll conduct polls and then put together insight reports. And I also feature editor spotlights, which are really popular. And this year I've been introducing some sponsored opportunities also for brands. And just the newsletter, just for everyone to know, the publicist version is a paid model, and beauty journalists apply for a free membership.
So exciting. I love this newsletter. I feel like you have such great insider information. You are like the beauty editor of the beauty editors and doing so much good work here. And I know that the way that this episode sort of came about is our team was sitting around and we were like, oh, let's bring on a bunch of beauty editors to talk about the best way to reach them, because obviously things have changed after the pandemic and we're just dealing with new circumstances. And Sarah Spruik-Feiner, one of our reporters, was like, just bring on Erica Metzger. She knows all of the insights from all of the editors. And we're like, oh, duh, we have to bring on Erica. So I'm so glad that it worked out. But yeah, let's go ahead and start with, the one big topic on our minds, which is the best way to reach beauty and wellness editors for seeding new products. Like I mentioned, it feels like there are so many obstacles right now. People are remote, change in values and environmental impact concerns of mailers. So maybe we have some like specific questions, but maybe give us sort of an overarching, what have you learned? What kind of insights have you picked up on?
Yeah, sure. So, the news, it's kind of interesting how the Beauty Loop actually evolved quite a bit during the pandemic. And that's kind of when a lot of changes happened, specifically around mailers. And I did a lot of polling with editors and specifically on mailers because the needs and the requirements and expectations changed rapidly. Like if we'll all remember pre-pandemic, most editors were on a staff. There were fewer freelancers out there. There were bigger staffs with interns. We were in the office 5 days a week. We received bags and packages via messenger, and actually snail mail was probably a little less popular. We had all these we had mail rooms and resources to kind of gather the inventory and organize it. There's giveaway tables and beauty sales. So there's all this help with all these products because products take up so much space, right? And they require a lot of work and time. And then with the pandemic, it changed. Everything really changed. And there was that big shift from we couldn't go to events, right? So budgets went towards mailers. So brands were putting a lot more money into creating, getting products into the hands of editors who were at home. And so you probably see where I'm going with this, with the issue of storage becoming, changing the game for people. And all of a sudden we had to kind of editors needed to have like boundaries around mailers. It was kind of this new requirement because, you know, your office was your personal space and you were a team of one, basically, you know, you had to kind of deal with it. So amazing as it is, I mean, this is like, you know, the champagne editor problem, but it was a problem because it's just, it was just really overwhelming and it took a lot of time and work. So there was this evolution of mailers, editors wanting consent. And now the trend is, or the best practice is, editors receive emails with where they're asking to opt in. And it's a lot more, I think publicists have really tried to make the experience a lot more helpful for editors and not just to kind of send them without asking. That's a big one I would start with.
Okay, yeah. So I've gotten some of those where, you know, a publicist will email you and they're like, fill out this form. And it's sort of like a Survey Monkey kind of thing where it's like you can opt in or opt out and even pick your products.
Yeah, and brands are good. I mean, publicists are really smart about it because they'll have in the subject line, they'll have in bold, you know, and caps locks like mailer opt-in. So it's really scannable because as we know, and this is the catch-22 of the opt-in, editors' inboxes are completely slammed. Like they just can't answer enough emails. There's only so much they can get to with all their deadlines and all the demands. And so the other problem is the more that opt-in is sort of required and wanted, the more challenging it becomes to get an editor to respond to it as well. So, you know, I have heard from some editors that they'd like to see, you know, an option maybe to opt in like once or twice a year from an agency. And some editors might be game for that, where they're just like, okay, send me anything. And then there might be other editors who are more like, a lot more specific about what they're going to want to come in because there's just not, like I said, there's just not as much time and resources available to just managing, you know, all the products, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I have always been a bit curious about that. Like if you opt in to a send from a PR firm that has lots of clients, then do editors want the PR firm to just like keep sending them stuff? It's kind of like, well, we have your address now.
I think it's tricky. I think it's a tricky thing. And it's like how hyper customized our agency's gonna go, because I think there's some people who are totally fine with that. And then there's going to be other editors who really want to be selective. And so that is, again, it's like, it's the tricky part to solve here. And, you know, I don't think it's like an easy answer, honestly. Yeah, I know, unfortunately. But I have seen something that was really cool. I saw an agency sent me kind of an opt-in just for a summer mailer from all of their brands. And it was like super customized, like where you could kind of pick different, it was like all their brands and you could select up to like 2 to 3 products from each of the brands. And then also it noted what was like, what was a new launch, what was kind of like a cult classic. And it was like, I felt like it was like a menu, you know, it was kind of a really interesting way to pick and choose what I thought might be the most applicable that I might be able to pitch and write about. And because that's the other side of it too. If you say yes to everything as an editor, and especially as a freelancer too, then there's, you know, there is a bit of a pressure on the other hand of like, okay, when are you going to write about this? There's a lot of like follow-up that comes with it. So when you're opting in, you're also kind of saying yes to, I'm going to get back to you about this. And that's another challenge for editors. They have a very hard time responding to emails just because, again, their inboxes are completely overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the idea of the opt-in. I feel like that makes a lot of sense with like specific products, because also, like you mentioned earlier, without the like office free table to then disseminate seeded goods to people in the art team or people in the events team or just other people who also, have reason to try things. Without that, it's kind of like, oh, God, it's just mountains of product.
Yeah,
and I'm sure all these editors are dealing with. Okay, so I have one more question here down this list. Let's talk about whether or not these like super fancy, elaborate mailers are, and I think everybody knows what I'm talking about here, the ones that are like, oh, there's fruit and there's cake and there's like keychains and stickers and glitter and they're big. It's like the very elaborate fancy mailers. Are those passe? What have you heard, Erica?
So there's like two components to that, because I think we're talking a little bit about like the swag part of it and also the packaging. And I think like first maybe I'll speak to this idea of excessive packaging. And that was another, trend that came out of the pandemic where editors really were not happy. We're struggling with, heavy mailers, massive boxes, layers and layers of plastic, or like shredded paper, or just a lot to open. And they were asking for eco-friendly. That became like a huge request, and it still is. More streamlined packaging, smaller and more efficient mailers were kind of like and I think that still holds true. Editors still want something kind of simple in that way. I mean, I think the thing is, and I've heard, more recently, actually very recently, about perishable products are kind of a challenge, because that means you have to kind of, that's kind of assuming you have a very easy delivery system. Like if you're in an office and they've got a messenger system set up that's really great and they deliver it and they'll remove, some of them will break down boxes. There are some companies that still do things like that, but there's some big media companies that editors have to go pick up their own stuff if they're in the office, and there's still, we have these hybrid schedules, and so it's like that can be challenging. Like I've heard that things go bad, things get spoiled before they can actually open them. So the coordination part of it is, a factor you have to kind of think about. But editors have said there's always exceptions to the rule. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's some of these really special, thoughtful gifts that editors might be able to use in their homes, or something that feels like experiential. There is value to that, right? Because that's what part of the function of these mailers are. There is this connection to a brand. You're building a relationship with the editor. So I do understand why brands go that route. But I don't think that trend, I think that trend is a little bit on the decline. And editors are really appreciating like smaller, thoughtful gifts. Swag is still appreciated by editors. I'll pause because I'll keep rambling, but I think that does bring me to the topic of branded merch, because that comes up a lot with editors as not the most appealing type of gift with a mailer. I don't know. Have you had thoughts of this one, Lexi?
I mean, I think that it's more likely to be not wanted is the branded merch. I think some of the merch is really, really cute, and some of the merch is cute, but you won't use it maybe to be nice. I don't know. Glossy team, what do you all think about branded merch? I certainly have gotten a few things. Like I know there's like a baseball cap right now in my pile from Vacation Sunscreen that like I've been loving. So I don't know.
Yeah, I personally tend to not prefer it, but that's just my own personal aesthetic. I don't really like branded anything, so I'm not a fan, but I do know that like people will love a good hat, like you mentioned, or a tote bag. Actually, I probably would be okay with a tote bag. I do love tote bags.
Yeah, and I do think there's, so sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Erica, I was just going to ask, like, when you're speaking with brands and the whole relationship, their intention with the mailer to editors, they're going to fall in love with the product. They're going to see something super unique and interesting and story worthy about it to write about. I'm wondering about, I guess, the different approach to a mailer for an editor versus a mailer for an influencer, particularly because many editors have a large social following in their own right, and maybe they are posting these products on their own channels. And if there is a different intention and a different approach?
Yeah, definitely. So the approach definitely for the editors, ultimately the brands want the editor to write about the product. So the goal is, I think the collateral that's included with whatever the mailer is definitely going to be more informative and a deeper dive than the information that they might include, give to an influencer. They might give like the same, for a launch, the same exact products might go to an editor and influencer, but we know like the editors, the goal is for them primarily to write about the product and to cover it. And yes, they would also like the post. And to your point, like editors, there's certainly a lot of editors with big followings. And I think that is, they see, brands definitely see value when those products are posted. So they definitely would like that too. But the editor inclination is not like post for the most part. With influencers, the goal obviously is to create content, right? They want something really visual and so the information they give them is going to help them with their storytelling. So it might be a little bit of, they're not going to send them a press release. I don't think influencers get press releases, but they're going to get like, talking points. And then the influencer might show the package with all the stuff, like all those layers of a box or something like that's because that's a visual, experience, and that makes great content. But for an editor, that doesn't really like, that's not really important, So they're treated differently in that way. No.
Yeah. Do they typically, is there a success rate or like a rule of thumb? Like we're sending out this much product, we're going to see this many stories or media impact to come of it?
I mean, I have heard that the more you send, the more hits you're going to get. I mean, so yeah, I don't have a specific numbers, but it is a numbers game in some ways. And this, the struggle is, I think with influencers, like, it's a different way to access them versus like the traditional media list that publicists have. I think there's, companies or specialists that publicists can use to get to seed to influencers. And it's less of a personalized approach. Whereas with editors, there's, as we talked about, like there's more of that personal email outreach. I mean, unless there's like, the brand has like special relationships, of course, but, I'm talking on like kind of that big scale. It's just a lot more like of getting those, it's a lot more that personalized outreach with media and the relationships.
Thank you. One more question. As brands are kind of tightening their purse strings or like budgets are becoming a thing, are you noticing they're pulling back on sampling?
I think, well, it's kind of interesting because I think brands are still spending money in different ways. Because if you look at like what's going on with media, like I think a lot of dollars are going to press trips, like for launches or big events. I think, the money, the dollars kind of shift. Like, during the pandemic, the mailers were like, they were an event, people were spending money on their mailers. And there's still a ton of product being sent. Like, I mean, as a freelancer, I don't get as much as when I used to be on staff. But when I talk to my editor friends who are on staff, they still feel like the quantity is still there. Like they're still getting a lot of stuff. I think there's still, gifting included, like, more thoughtful gifts, maybe like small gift cards or, things that are like personalized or just, I don't think things are super extravagant and over the top, but I think brands are still really eager to get products in the hands of the editors.
Oh, Erica, I like that you talked about more thoughtful and intentional gifts. Can you share some examples from your experience with any gifting that you received that you really felt like made an impact or, maybe incentivize you to write about the product or share on your own personal story?
Yeah. I just thought this actually wasn't a gift, but I thought this was a brand sent they sent their mailer and they included a label to go to a charity. And they said, after you're done, and the mailer didn't include a gift. It was like an organizer, which I still use. And it was like something super practical for a beauty editor who has lots of like stuff. It was just a really nice organizer. So that was one component. And then the box, they said, fill the box up with, donation products. Cause that's another issue editors have, right? Where we always have too much product that we have to keep it moving. And they had the address label. It was prepaid. So all I had to do was fill it up, package it, not a big deal, and then stick the label on it and then donate it. And it just was like made my conscience feel really good because, we go through a lot of products. There's so much waste in our industry. And it just felt like they were supporting us in a way to, do something positive. So I love that example. I think it would be a great thing for more brands to do, honestly, if we could like give back to people who need products, because we all have too much product at the end of the day,
I love that. Do you remember where it went to? What charity?
I don't. I wish I remember. No, yeah, I don't remember. But I know there's
love that.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. I think between editors, I think we, there's conversations that go on between us, like, okay, who are you donating to? Like, how do you get this product to people who can really put it to good use? Because we donate it to people in our lives, and people who are not in the beauty industry who don't have tons of products, but to like really get it somewhere where it helps people who really can't afford things. I think that's just something I would love to see that more of a regular industry standard, because it doesn't seem like it would be that expensive when you think about how much sometimes there'll be things in a mailer and you're just like, and I don't want to sound rude, but you're just like, that was a total waste of money. There was no impact. It was like, why did they spend? It felt like they're just putting something in the box. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Mostly from my days at Refinery when we were in office pre-pandemic and just getting loads of boxes every single day. And you kind of shift the burden of all of this stuff onto the editor. And I think that sometimes can be almost like a little overwhelming for editors, because it's like, oh great, like this was really nice and thoughtful, and like the hero product that came out of the box, like that's cool, but then there's all this other stuff, and what am I going to do with it? Because now I'm responsible for it. So I love that donation, that idea for publicists listening today. I love that. Erica, I have a question for you. What kind of, I don't know if you have an answer to this because we didn't talk about it, but what kind of pet peeves have you heard about seating from editors? What are the things they like, oh God, get under their skin, or that they can't stand, or that they feel like they don't understand why it's done this way?
Yeah. Well, I would say, like, first of all, like if you just get a package and you didn't say that, an unexpected package, you were like, I did not say yes to this. Again, the consent thing, you'll see some editors have on their signature, do not send me a package without getting my consent first. Like that is definitely a pet peeve. I think when anything that becomes like a big inconvenience, like when the thing that you're trying to send, it's just like there's a lot of back and forth. You have to be there at a certain time to receive it. Like when it starts impeding on like your time in that way, it just it's all these little things that kind of like take away from what the ultimate goal is. So that's kind of the thing. Like there's that like frustration with, you didn't have to do it like this and you created more work. I hear that a lot. I think the too much packaging, it feels like it's really just not good for the planet. Like we're just creating more problems. That doesn't feel good when you're just, excessive packaging. I think, in terms of like extras that brands include. Oh, another thing is if you're there's like a new skin foundation launch, don't send the entire line of, every single color.
And I think why do people do this?
Yeah, I think brands are getting better about it. I've definitely I get emails where they ask you for your shade. I think a lot of people are getting on board with that. So, but that's just something to mention. Like, let them pick one of the shades or a small grouping versus so many, because they're not going to be able to try them all, right? And I think too, like, there was a point where everybody, I always try to keep the newsletter super constructive, and it's meant to, like, whatever. Sometimes we do kind of vent things or talk about things that are points of tension in a way to kind of problem solve and troubleshoot. And I remember one newsletter I wrote because I think I had like 50 water bottles. I mean, they did not stop coming. And I just kind of was like, can we just kind of chill with the water bottles? And a lot of people, and I normally don't write those kind of things because I know publicist jobs are so hard. They're trying to, and water bottles are super useful and practical. And that's a great gift. But at that point, editors had been receiving so many. So, there's certain things where you're just like, you have to say like, when, no more of, no more sleep masks, please. No more robes. But there is always going to be somebody who didn't get a robe yet. So I totally get the challenge there,
Yeah. I feel like I just keep going back to the like free table. Like, I feel like if an editor, if they're in an office part of the week and there's a free table there, then I feel like have at it. But if you're sending it to a freelancer or someone who works at home, I feel like you just have to have restraint.
Yeah. And I do think, Lexi, and I've heard this from so many publicists, I think a lot of publicists know this. And because the thing a lot of them will tell me is they'll take like the insight reports that I do in the newsletter and they'll show them to clients to convince their clients why what the client wants to do is not the best approach. So I do think there is this, there's a bit of a disconnect further down the line. And the publicists are typically trying to do the best they can. They want the editor to get something. They want the editor to open this mailer, feel like a connection with the brand, feel like, they recognize the time and there's this connection, and they want the experience to be positive. Nobody wants an editor to be annoyed with them, right?
Of course. If anyone here listening, we have a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions, we would love to hear from you. Please just raise your hand.
In the meantime, Erica, I have one more question. I'm very much about the this versus that, but are you finding that even PR companies or other are advising brands to take a different approach to gifting and seeding to reporters who are with a B2B publication versus reporters that are doing the product reviews and the best ofs and the roundups? I don't see really much differentiation in terms of what is being proposed or pitched to me, but maybe it's just me.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting because kind of back in the day, there was sort of like different, like the beauty directors would sort of get different mailers than, other members on the team. I think it's now certainly there are certain mailers, and I've heard this from some influencer friends too, where you see some people will get like the biggest version, right? Whatever that is, like they get a mailer that's like the extra mailer. And then there's like other versions where maybe, the freelancer will get the product, but they won't get anything extra with it. It's a lot more streamlined, and which makes, I think it makes a lot of sense how the budgets only go so far, and they have to be really strategic about, how they're working with those budgets and how things are getting to people. And at the end of the day, ultimately, like speaking as somebody who was a beauty director for many years at 2 different publications and now as a freelancer and definitely receives products in a different way, I don't need products the same way as when I was a beauty director. Like, I'm actually very happy to be on lists and to be able to receive products to still have enough so that when I'm writing a story, an assignment, or I know I can like call it in to test it out. But again, it's like, I don't want all that. Like at this point, it's sort of like, it becomes a bit burdensome to have too much stuff coming your way. So I think it's probably pretty appropriate the way it kind of shakes out.
For sure. Thank you.
All right. If anyone has any questions, you can hit that little react button at the bottom. and I will invite you up to the stage to ask a question. And in the meantime, I have one more here. Let's talk a little bit about rule-breaking mailers. How and why, Erica, do you think that some elaborate mailers seem to break through the noise and have a big moment, and others just kind of end up as stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I was thinking about the CeraVe campaign with Michael Cera.
Yeah.
And that mailer really stood out to me because it was so, well, the whole campaign was so clever and amazing. Just, I think that was like very unique and very special. But it really, I saw people posting that mailer who typically don't post, and I'm talking about beauty journalists and editors who don't typically post products so much, and they were just commenting on, this is just genius. And it kind of broke, some rules where there was branded merch where, we talked about that. That's not typically the favorite of editors. I held on to that merch for a while before I was like, okay, I think I have to find it a new home, because it was just so fun and creative and out of the box. So that was just one that I think was really special and really stand out. And then you think about, there's some other ones where I think maybe because there were so many pieces to that, that's probably why it was much bigger than just a mailer. Maybe that's why it was so spectacular. I think about some of the other.
Can I stop you for a second? What was, for people who aren't familiar, and I don't even really remember exactly what it was. I remember the campaign so well, and I remember seeing the mailer, but what was in the mailer? Do you remember?
It was hysterical. It had it was a t-shirt with his face on it. It was
that's right.
Candle that was unscented, which was funny. It had it was wrapped. It was tape. The tape of the box had his face on it. I mean, it was just these
really funny.
Yeah, the whole, as soon as the package came, it made you smile. You were just like, what is this? This is hysterical. It had a stuffed, because it was so crazy. It had a stuffed narwhal. And I was like, what is this narwhal? And I guess that's a thing with Michael Cera. I don't know if he had a show or something. I remember Googling it. Now, of course, I forget what the connection was, but it really did really shake you up. It was just totally different than any other kind of mailer I'd received in a long time. And then
I love it.
Yeah. I just think sometimes mailers don't feel, not that they have to feel super personal, but even a simple mailer, I think, with the product and there's a handwritten note, I find that much more compelling than when it's just, it looks like it was just anyone, you know what I mean? It feels, it just feels like you want to give it a little more of your attention because you can feel the intention behind it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Definitely. Awesome. Oh, this was such a great conversation. Erica, thank you so much for coming on to our Beauty Debrief today to share all your valuable insights. Last question here. Where can listeners find you outside of LinkedIn, and how can they sign up for the newsletter?
Oh, great question. You can go to, I think the easiest thing is go to my Instagram. It's Erica R. Metzger, and it's got all the links to get to my newsletter and sign up, and you can DM me. You can also contact me on LinkedIn if you need more information. And yeah, this was so great. I could go on and on, as you could tell, Lexi.
Yeah, no, I love it. I feel like we could all talk all day about beauty stuff. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. So appreciate it. Tatiana, Jill, Courtney, and I will be back next week. please tune in. We'll have a new topic. And I hope that everyone has an amazing rest of their Wednesday.
Thank you. Thanks, Erica.
Everybody.